Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Healing Our Children 2018 World Summit. I'm your host, Alison Morris, and today I'm also really happy to be your host for a class on EFT or tapping, called Using EFT Tapping to Acknowledge and Allow Your Emotions and Accept Yourself in Spite of It All. So let's get started. First, I want to begin with a little bit about me. I am a certified emotional freedom techniques or EFT tapping practitioner. I am not, however, a licensed mental health practitioner or medical professional of any kind. So by tapping along to this session today, you are agreeing to take responsibility for your own health, your own well-being. EFT is almost always an extremely gentle technique, and we're not going to be delving into any big T traumas today, so everyone should be just fine, but I always want to get that out there before we get started. Why are our emotions so important to us? Well, it starts really with the definition of emotion, which goes back to the Latin movere, which means to move, and then the A, which is out. So emotions are fundamentally about moving out, expressing, releasing. We are not built to hold on to our emotions, to stuff them down, to deny them, to pretend they're not there, to just wish they go away, push against them, resist them, all those good things. We are built to feel our emotions and then let them go. So often people will refer to emotions as energy in motion, and that's another really great way to think about it, because of course everything that we're ever doing in this life is about moving energy, and our emotions are definitely another type of energy. Unfortunately, what happens is that often we feel like our emotions are bad, they're wrong, we feel guilty for feeling certain things. As parents of challenging children, we are especially prone to this because parenting our kids is hard. It's hard being a parent in any case, but parenting our children presents a number of additional difficulties and struggles, as I know you are all familiar with. Here's the other really neat thing about our emotions, though. They are a built-in guidance system. They're like our personal GPS. And what do I mean by that? So I believe that at our core, we as human beings, as spiritual beings in a human body, are love. At our core, we are nothing but love. And anytime we come across a situation that we perceive or believe to be something different from love, something that is loving, it creates an energetic gap. And the further apart we are from our true state of love, the worse we feel. So if love is way up here on sort of an emotional scale, way, way, way down at the bottom, we have things like shame. It's possibly one of the heaviest, densest emotions that we can have. Depression is down there as well. Maybe surprisingly, anger, frustration, irritation, even rage are slightly up the scale because they have more power to them, as opposed to depression and again shame that sort of sucks all the power out of us and leaves us feeling really hopeless and despondent, those really unpleasant things. So anytime we are in a situation and our perception is that we are no longer loved, that we are no longer being loving, that love is absent from the situation, we have what we call bad emotions. They're more difficult emotions. The thing is, it's all an illusion. It's not real, but we perceive it to be real. That's part of what we're here on this planet to experience, all this range of emotions. But what it means is that we can always rely on our emotions to tell us how far we've moved from what you might think of as our higher truth, or what our higher self knows to be true, who we are at a soul or a spiritual level, and what we're experiencing on a very human level. So we can always rely on that gap between ourselves and ourselves to let us know what we need to do, how far we've, I don't want to say fallen, that's not a very nice term to use, how far away we've moved from the truth, which is love. Now, you don't have to believe that in order for tapping to work for you. I just wanted to throw that in you because that's what I personally have come to believe over the years. Here's another really, really important thing about our emotions. And a lot of you may have heard this before, and you may believe it intellectually, but it can still be really hard to get your head around in practice, which is that we are not our emotions. Some of you may have come across the book Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. Excuse me. I believe Oprah selected it for her book club several years ago now, so it had a big rise in popularity back then. But Michael Singer, the author of that book, does a really good job helping to sort of prove that we are not what we feel, we're not the thoughts in our head, because there's always somebody else observing those things. So I can observe myself having a thought about my child. I can step away and saying, wow, I'm really mad right now. Or, wow, that really hurt my feelings. Now, who's the person, who's the entity stepping back, getting some distance, getting a little bit detached from the immediate situation? That is different from our brains or our minds that are spinning around and around, always telling us, or often telling us, a lot of really negative things about what's going on. She must not love me anymore. He would rather somebody else were his parent. They're never going to get better. Things are always going to be like this. We'll never have enough money for that therapy. Just all the what they call monkey chatter that goes around in our heads, but they're not who we really are. And so to the extent that we can step back a little bit, that already helps us in recognizing that we are not our emotions, and that we can, they don't have to always be a part of us. We can allow them to move through us and move out, and we can get on with some other things. Okay. Another really critical thing about our emotions is that pushing against them, resisting them, is futile. So Carl Jung, many, many years ago, said something along the lines of what you resist persists. And we all have experience with this. Another way of looking at this, if you're familiar with the concept called law of attraction, is that we are always attracting into our own realities, into our own lives, things, people, experiences that match the vibration that we send out into the universe. And so when we expect things to be awful, when we are feeling bad and we think life is always against us, and everything's always a competition, we have to scrabble to get ahead, then we will invariably produce experiences in our lives that prove that belief to ourselves. Bruce Lipton, in his work, Biology of Belief, also talks very eloquently about how our beliefs create our reality. So the longer we are holding on to or pushing away from emotions that we don't want to feel, that we don't want to have, the problem is that that effort in and of itself is keeping our focus on those things that we don't want in our lives anymore. And that has the effect of keeping them in our lives. which isn't fair. It doesn't sound fair, does it? But that is the way it works. It's almost like a magnetizing effect. And so what we are focused on, we always draw more of that to ourselves. Again, you don't need to believe that in order for EFT to work for you. So I just wanted to give you a little bit more background of some of the perspective that I bring to all of this after a number of years of doing tapping, of doing a lot of reading on some other things. But really, so what we want to be doing and what EFT is really great at is allowing ourselves to just feel our emotions, feel okay even though we had them, and just let them go. It's called emotional freedom techniques, and it's so called because it allows you to be free from your emotions, which is wonderful. Gary Craig created EFT many years ago now. It was developed really from a more complicated form of energy work called thought field therapy. And so we are going to get into now a little bit more about what EFT can do. So EFT is really, really helpful at helping us release what you might think of as stuck or trapped emotions. We've heard other folks during the summit this week talk about how we store trauma and other things in our bodies. And there's an increasing amount of really fascinating research that proves, for instance, that trauma is transmitted intergenerationally. So we can still be holding trauma from our great-great-great-grandparents, which sounds is a little hard to get your head around when you first think about it. But it's something that I think we just sort of need to accept, not dwell on it too much. In any case, we want to just be able to move through things. We want to get rid of them, and here's how we can do that. So EFT is especially helpful at certain things. So EFT can be used for almost anything. In fact, its little tagline is try it on anything, or try it on everything, I think is actually it. It's especially helpful for working on traumas. It has been used increasingly at disaster zones around the world, for civil war in Guatemala, in Liberia, other places in Africa. It is being used to help refugees from Syria and elsewhere who are now in Europe. It was used for years, and I think is still being used in Newtown, Connecticut, to assist the survivors of the Sandy Hook shootings. And more recently, it's been used in Florida at Marjorie Stoneman High School. But EFT can also be used for our day-to-day little t traumas, and just helping us move through the stress, the fear, the overwhelm, the confusion, all the things that are so common, unfortunately, for parents of challenging children. So there is a lot of science now supporting how EFT works. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of that today. Among other things, EFT lowers cortisol levels in our body, so that's a good thing, right? Those are a really potent stress hormone that is also associated with weight gain. So, and of course, stress in all its forms is just not a good thing for our bodies, for our overall health. It has been shown to place us into a light meditative state. So it sort of calms our brain waves down. And what that allows us to do is actually tap into our subconscious brains, which of course are running something like 90 to 95% of what we do and think every day. So we have all this programming, most of which was instilled in us between possibly before birth until about age 7. And during that period, we are just little recording devices. Things that we see and hear, we're just downloading directly. We don't have any discernment at that age. We're not wondering if it's really true. We just trust that what we see and experience and perceive is fact. And those programs then tend to run in the background, or maybe they're dormant for a while until our kids push that button, hit play, and then boom, something that your father said to you when you were 5. That memory may not come back, although it may, but the feeling that you had of maybe of being attacked, of being scared that you weren't loved anymore, of feeling unsafe, whatever that is, all of that can come rushing back to you. So again, our kids are enormously adept at pushing our buttons, and the subconscious programming is more than happy to sort of play over and over and over again, just on rewind. Now, this programming also, of course, has enormous benefits for us. It helps keep our hearts beating. It keeps us breathing and walking, and we can drive our cars without rethinking about it every single time. And it keeps us safe. It is designed first and foremost to keep us alive. And so it always prefers the safe, the known, the familiar. And so, but it can also hold us back. So if we have programming that is convincing us that, I don't know, that if our children don't tell us that they love us, then they don't, because maybe it was a really big deal in your house for everybody to say they loved each other all the time. Just pulling that out of as an example. Those programs will be always running and always come up when you sort of least expect them. And they're often not things that we're aware of at all. And so another interesting thing about EFT is it allows us to kind of bring those things to a little bit more conscious awareness. Okay, so I got a little off track there. Back to the science. There's some evidence too that EFT may interrupt signals from our amygdala, which is the part of our brain that signals us that we are in danger. So that's the part that says fight or flee. I'm actually not sure. I think that part I'm not sure if that part takes care of the freeze response or not, but in any case, and there is some speculation too that it helps us process our memories in a different way, so that they are no longer, they're not as accessible and they're not as vibrant, perhaps is the word. So it's not like you're going to forget something after you've tapped on it, but the intensity of the memory of something that happened is mellowed or dulled. It is, it's almost like turning it to black and white when it was in, Technicolor with surround sound before. So it can just help dial down some intense experiences that way. Okay, so I want to move on. I want to talk to you about what I have come up with really as an important way to think about how EFT can be so useful to parents. And they're the 3 A's: acknowledge, allow, and accept. So before we get into the specifics of tapping, I just want to go through these really briefly. First is acknowledge. The first thing that EFT asks you to do is to identify what's bothering you. Now that sounds kind of simplistic, and most people would say, well, I know perfectly well what's bothering me. But it's not quite that simple when you actually sit down and you're asked to pinpoint a specific thing that's really, really got you going right now. But what EFT then does, it allows you to acknowledge what you're feeling, what you're confronted with, what you're facing. And for many people, this can itself be a very healing thing. Because I think a lot of times we don't permit ourselves again, to feel what we're really feeling for all sorts of reasons. We're afraid it's going to overwhelm us. We're afraid we're never going to stop crying if we go there, or maybe we'll never stop yelling if we feel all that anger, if we name it. If we name it, I am furious, I am enraged. So the act of naming it can be in itself a very cathartic thing. So I don't want you to dismiss that as just like, oh well, okay, I'm sad about something. It's take some time and figure out what it is that you are feeling and what it is that you want to address. The next important thing that EFT allows us to do is, again, to allow ourselves to feel what we're feeling. So these are sort of related, but slightly different. So I just want to make this distinction clear. EFT asks us to actually tune into the emotion at issue. And it could also be, EFT can also be used for physical symptoms like pain. But for the purposes of this discussion, we're talking about feeling into an emotion. And this presents more difficulties for some people than you might imagine. We, again, spend so much time denying the way we're feeling, pushing it away, stuffing it down, pushing it aside, that many of us are completely disconnected with how we are truly feeling, especially in our bodies, not just what we're thinking. So we might say, I'm really mad, but we don't take the time to notice on a somatic level, what is that? Where are we feeling that? Are we feeling a burning in our chest? Do we feel a churning in our stomach? Do we feel heaviness in our shoulders? Do we feel a tightness in our jaw? Do we feel a clenching in our eyes? What is going on? And it asks us to take some time and allow ourselves, again, to feel what we're feeling. Now, I want to say right here, right now, we are not going to get into big T traumas today. And I would very much recommend that if you have a really, really intense experience that you would like to work on, to release, that you not tackle that on your own. We're going to talk about something called a SUDS level in a minute, which is called subjective unit of distress. And I don't want anyone working on anything that's above like maybe a 6 or a 7 on your own, just so that you can be safe, take care of yourself, because we want anybody to have a reaction that you can't handle on your own. Then what we're going to do, and this is again part of the EFT process, is we accept ourselves despite the fact that we have this feeling or the problem that we're facing. It's a kind of an affirmation. Sometimes people have some trouble with this, and we'll talk through some alternatives if the standard phrase doesn't work for you. But this is a really important part of this, because it's telling yourself that you're okay. You're okay even though you feel this way. You're okay even though you lost your temper. You're okay even though you're worried about your child. You're okay. And that there's nothing wrong with the fact that you feel the way you feel, and that you can move through this. So acknowledge, allow, accept, the 3 A's around EFT. So let's do an example here. What we're going to work on, what I'm going to teach you, is what's called the basic recipe. It's a simplified version of what had initially been a more elaborate process that Gary Craig developed. And he discovered after time that this shorter version was just as effective and took a whole lot less time for most cases. And so this is what I'm going to teach you today. So again, you start off with an issue, identifying a problem. In this case, we're just going to work on an emotion. So for the sake of an example, let's say that your child got really mad at you last night and they swore at you, called you a really ugly name. Now, there's a number of emotions that you might have about that. You might just be sort of exasperated. You might be deeply hurt. You might be really pissed off, or maybe you're just sad. You're just sad. So for this purpose, let's say that it really hurt our feelings. And that's, I guess, related to sadness, maybe a little bit different, but that's okay. So again, we are sort of naming what it is. And then I want you to take a moment, and if this is an event that is true in your life, maybe it wasn't last night, maybe it was a week ago, maybe it was 5 years ago, just take a moment. And if it's not quite this for you, that's okay. I'll explain that in a minute too. There's a really neat thing in EFT called borrowing benefits, which allows you to benefit from the tapping along with somebody else, even if what they're tapping on isn't pertinent specifically to your situation. It's a really neat sort of side effect, if you will, of tapping along with other people. So we've identified what we're going to work on. And now you just take a moment and you allow yourself to really feel that hurt. And maybe you want to think about the word that was used. And who knows, maybe your heart's pounding a little faster. Maybe you feel yourself tearing up. Whatever it is fine. And you just want to notice that, pay attention to it. And give yourself some time. Again, so many of us are really detached from how we feel. And it's not something we can just call up in ourselves instantly. And what you want to do is then, on a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is you are completely unbothered by this event, memory doesn't faze you at all, and 10 is you're in really bad shape about this. And really what we're aiming for in terms of what we're going to work on today is, maybe you're a 4 or 5, maybe a 6. In terms of your distress about this event and then the name that you were called. And just for the purposes of this example, I'm going to say that it was my son called me a bitch. Okay, just so we have something to talk about. However, what we're going to do is we're going to first we're going to construct what's called a setup phrase, which usually starts with even though. And then you describe the problem, even though I'm really hurt because my son called me a bitch last night. And then comes the affirmation. This is where you accept yourself anyway. I deeply and completely accept myself anyway. And that's our setup phrase. We're going to say that 3 times while we tap with one hand on the side of the hand. Now, just a word about this. In lots of places, especially older things, including things I've done, this spot was referred to as the karate chop point, and we have realized how culturally insensitive that was and have moved on to describe it by its anatomical position, just like we do with the rest of the tapping points. So we call this the side of the hand. You can tap on either hand with the other hand, makes no difference. And just repeat after me. Even though I am really hurt that my son called me a bitch last night, I deeply and completely accept myself anyway. Even though it really hurt my feelings when my son called me a bitch last night, I deeply and completely accept myself anyway. Even though I'm still so hurt about the fact that my son called me a bitch last night, I deeply and completely accept myself anyway. And now we start the tapping. I'm going to call out these points, but just follow along. And for those of you who are listening by phone, I'll post a separate thing so that you can follow the points later too. Top of the head. You can tap with either hand. And what we do is say a little reminder phrase that keeps you focused on the emotion, the event that you're trying to release. So in this case, we'd say, my feelings were hurt. Then we go to the eyebrow point, inside of the eyebrow. My feelings were hurt. Side of the eye, all this hurt feeling. Now we might change it up a little. Under the eye, right here on this bone, just gently with 1 or 2 fingers. My son called me a bitch. Under the nose, really hurt my feelings. This is called the chin point. It's really below the lower lip. My feelings were really hurt. The collarbone point, find your collarbone, go down and over a little bit into that notch area. I like to use all 5 fingers and kind of go back and forth across this whole place. Some people use their whole hand. I don't find that as satisfying personally, but that works too. My son called me a bitch. And the final point, this one's kind of funny. You can either curl your hand up and tap under your arm, about where a bra strap would cross on a woman, so about 4 or 5 inches under your armpit, or you can reach across your chest and tap on the other side. My feelings were really hurt. That's called 1 round of tapping. And really, you don't need to do a bunch of rounds. You don't need to do 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 rounds. Try 1, stop, take a breath, and check in and notice how you're feeling. If you sigh, if you yawn, if you start to cry, those are all really great expressions of release. That's your body releasing energy, allowing things to move through you and out. So to move out, right? Then you're expressing your emotions. Some people don't feel that, and that's okay too. But check in with how you're feeling. And here's a really important point. It can be really easy when you're checking back in to think that nothing's gotten better because, in fact, what you're feeling has not shifted in intensity, but it's shifted in kind. So maybe you're not feeling hurt anymore. Now maybe you're feeling a little bit angry. Or vice versa. Maybe you started tapping off on anger, and what the anger's gone and what's left is sadness. So pay attention to that. Some people, again, think that EFT didn't work because they didn't notice that shift. So again, check into yourself. Think about the incident. Play it again in your mind if you want to. And hear your son calling you a bitch in your head. And what response does that bring up in you? You always want to test to see if you've kind of gotten everything or if there are certain parts of it that are back. And maybe you'll remember something. So maybe, for instance, you actually got a little bit scared. Maybe the expression on your son's face really threw you for a loop. So maybe, again, the sadness is, or the hurt is more or less gone, and you need to tap on this other thing now. But let's just say, for instance, that you're feeling better, but you're still hurt. It still hurts you. So you can go back, and you can either start again with the setup phrase, even though I'm still hurt by the fact that my son swore at me last night. Why did he need to call me a bitch? I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I really, really did not like it when my son called me a bitch last night, and it really wounded me, hurt my feelings. I deeply and completely accept myself anyway. Even though my heart still hurts that my son would call me a bitch. Maybe I knew this day would come, but I really didn't think it was going to happen. And now it has, and I'm really hurt. I deeply and completely accept myself anyway. Top of the head, this wounded feeling. Eyebrow, I still feel hurt. Side of the eye, my son called me a bitch. Under the eye, it really hurts my feelings. Under the nose, this hurt feeling. Chin point, my heart is still hurting. Collarbone, my feelings are still hurt. Under the arm, this hurt feeling. All right, actually that made me sigh, letting loose something. So again, you check back in, always just check back in and see how you're feeling. And ideally, you want to get things lower and lower until you're at a 0, maybe a 1. You need to kind of judge if there are other things maybe that you need to work on that are more pressing at the time. So that's the basic recipe. That's, again, a really simple way of doing it. Now, you notice that when we were going through the points, I didn't just say, my feelings are hurt, or this hurt feeling over and over and over again. You absolutely can do that. That's the easiest thing to do, because a lot of times when people are tapping, they get confused about what words to use, and I don't know how to change it up at every point, and that's overwhelming. Don't worry about that then. Just use the same words. You could just say, I'm so hurt, I'm so hurt, I'm so hurt, over and over again. That's okay, perfectly fine. If you're really struggling to come up with what those words are, then just tap. Tapping without words can still be really helpful. It may not be as helpful, but it's still better to tap than not to tap. I haven't done this for a while, I confess, but I have on many occasions just tapped in the car while I'm driving somewhere. And I'm not thinking about anything in particular, but I am yawning and sighing and getting rid of all sorts of things. I'm just trusting that my body knows what it's ready to get rid of, what it's ready to release. So just tap, even if you get a little bit worked up. Some people like to use long setup phrases. And if you feel the need to just get a lot of stuff out, to tell your story, to just narrate the whole darn thing, then do that. But don't just do it here. Tap. If you want to say the story of what happened, and then, and then my husband came in, and he got really mad at my son, and then my son got so defensive, and I can't believe this happened, and then that happened, and then my son called me a bitch, and wow, that really hurt me. Fine, just walk through the narrative. Go through, just keep tapping, keep going through the points. That's the biggest thing. You might want to keep water handy while you are tapping. You also might want to keep a pen and a paper nearby, again, because things can pop up. They can occur to you as you're tapping, and you don't want to lose track necessarily of what those little insights were. Another thing that is fairly common is for people to start jumping around to this and that and the other thing, but they haven't really resolved one issue before they've jumped to another. And so to keep yourself somewhat organized about what you are tapping on now and then what you want to tap on next, you might want to keep a list. And so that's another sort of tapping tip. Another thing that people sometimes get confused about when they're rating their intensity, sometimes people are remembering how mad they were at the time something happened, as opposed to how they're feeling about it in the present moment. And you always want to be rating how you are feeling right now, right here, not remembering what it was like then. You may recall that in order to, again, tune into that emotion again, but you always want to be judging yourself or rating yourself on how you're feeling right now. All right, I'm going to just check, make sure that I am not missing out on a couple things here. And then we're going to just do some more tapping. I'm going to go through and sort of help you understand some other things about how you can use tapping in your day-to-day life. Being specific. Another reason that people sometimes don't get the results with tapping that they are hoping to get is that they are tapping on things that are too global. Having said that, it can be really helpful, especially if you're first getting started, to start at a really global level. So you might start with, even though I am just completely overwhelmed with everything in my life, I deeply and completely accept myself anyway. And that's fine. If you want to do 2, 3, 4 rounds of tapping until you've taken it down a bit, you can feel your breath getting deeper. You can feel that you're getting bigger breaths, that you're not so tense, not so tight. That is great. No problem with that whatsoever. But if you're really trying to work on some really big stuff, then it is generally better to be more specific, meaning like I feel really guilty because I yell at my child all the time. That's kind of a not terribly helpful statement to tap on. Instead, find a specific example. It might be the most recent time that you exploded at your kid, you lost your temper and you're feeling bad about it. It might be the first time you ever did it, and that one really sticks with you because you felt like that was the start down the slippery slope. Just pick something though, and tap on that, as opposed to a sort of across the board general statement, because that sometimes is not as helpful. I was also going to tell you a little bit. So some people are not really crazy about the affirmation at the end of the setup phrase, I deeply and completely accept myself. Now, in some versions, it's I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Some people love that. They feel that's, again, very affirming. Some people don't like to use those words. Accept tends to be more palatable, I think, to more people than love and accept. But if that's not even sounding really great to you, then just switch it up. Find something else that works, like I'm going to be okay, or I'm learning to accept myself, or I want to accept myself, or I accept the way I feel. It sometimes feels a little bit more detached, and that can be kind of a way in until maybe then you can actually say that you accept yourself. So don't get too hung up about those words. There are so many ways that you can use tapping. Again, I mentioned you can use it for physical symptoms. So if you have a pain in your back or a tightness in your shoulders, you can tap on that specifically, just in the same way. You can use it, you can draw metaphors. Even though I have this red, fiery anger in my belly, I deeply and completely accept myself. You can use it to tap on fears or beliefs that you hold. So you can either use a scale of 0 to 10, or you can make it bigger if you want to have a more precise scale. Think about something like, I believe my child loves me. how true do you believe that is? And if you don't, and in this case, like 10 would be you believe it completely, and 0 would be you don't believe it all the way. So it's a little bit of a reverse scale. And then you can tap on that. So let's just try that and show you how that works. Just think about that statement for a minute. How true do you believe the statement, "My child loves me," is? And give yourself, a little number. And don't spend a lot of time on the ratings, right? It's just to gauge so that you can go back and test. It's not something that you have to pinpoint in a really precise way. Then you go to the side of the hand again. Even though I'm having trouble believing that my child really loves me, I deeply and completely accept myself anyway. Even though I'm not sure that I really believe that my child loves me, I deeply and completely accept myself anyway. And please just tap along with me. Just repeat what I'm saying. Even though I have my doubts about whether my child really loves me, I deeply and completely accept myself anyway. My child doesn't love me. My child doesn't love me. My child does not love me. I don't believe my child loves me. My child doesn't love me. My child does not love me. I don't believe my child loves me. My child does not love me. Big breath, let that out. Then go back and take a little measure of how you're feeling. It might be that going through that round of tapping has you in tears. Like you didn't realize how much you really doubted, or how much that the statement that they love you is not true, or the reverse, that they don't love you, is true. You can go either way with it. If you start to cry, if you get really emotional when you're tapping about something, again, if you go too far, that can be a bad thing. We don't want to re-traumatize anybody here. And EFT has all sorts of techniques to approach really big issues very gently and obliquely and without re-traumatizing anybody. I forgot to mention that EFT has been enormously successful at working, especially with veterans with PTSD, at reducing or eliminating an enormous number of symptoms. So it can be very powerful with those really big emotions. But if you just start to cry, crying is great. But what you can do is just keep tapping. Maybe you can't talk anymore. Maybe you just need to cry. That's fine. If you can, though, just keep tapping. Just keep tapping. And what you'll generally find is that your breath will start to calm and you'll feel better. And then you'll feel generally a lot lighter when you've moved through it. Again, you're just letting stuff out. It's a good thing. It's like the body having a fever. It's healing itself. It's so don't worry about tears. Tears are good. So have a box of Kleenex nearby if you need one. If you find yourself starting to get a little overwhelmed by something, one really nice sort of tapping thing that you can go through, and you might teach this to your kids too if you see them getting nervous or upset, anxious. Even though I'm feeling really worried or nervous or scared, or upset, whatever word fits for you. Always pick the word that resonates the most with you. You want to be tapping into your own psyche, your own state. And then instead of the normal affirmation, substitute these words. Right here, right now, I am safe. Even though I'm really worried about my child attacking me, right here, right now, I'm safe. Even though I'm really worried for my safety, right here, right now, I'm safe. And then you go through the points. I'm safe. I'm safe. Right here, right now, I'm safe. Right here, I'm safe. Right now, I'm safe. Right here, right now, I'm safe. Do that as many times as you need to. Kind of ground you, bring you back to the present moment, kind of get you recentered. So that's another really nice thing to use this for, is just to kind of bring yourself back. Just checking on a couple things here. I did want to also give you a little tip. So let's be honest, tapping looks a little weird. We can all acknowledge that. And although there are an increasing number of people who tap in public, like you may have seen people at the Olympics, a lot of big sports events, you'll see athletes tap to get themselves in the right mindset before they go out. People use tapping before speaking before groups of people, before performing, before doing a presentation at a big meeting. Again, it just sort of calms down everything in your nervous system, brings you back to center. So it's great in all number of different ways. But if you are, say, I don't know, let's say you're at an IEP meeting and things aren't going well and you can feel yourself getting kind of riled up, getting irritated, getting frustrated, feeling mad at people, you can do a kind of surreptitious tapping under the table. So there's a couple ways to do this. What you're going to do is you're going to tap on the inside of the nail bed on the fingers. I tend to do this on my left hand because I'm right-handed, but actually you can do it on either one. So you can take one finger and tap. Again, you're not saying anything. You're just kind of, you're in the present moment. You're kind of already keyed up. You're not saying anything. You're just tapping maybe 5, 7, 8 times, whatever. Then you go to the next finger, again, the inside part of the nail bed. Then you go to the middle finger. Some people skip the ring finger. Some people feel like it feels left out if you don't do it. And then the pinky finger. So you can use this hand to do that, and you can do it under the table. Nobody knows you're doing it. Under your desk, you teach your kids that they can do this under the desk at school. No one will ever know that they're doing this. Or you can do the one-handed version where you take your index finger to tap on that on your thumb, and then you use your thumb to tap on the inside of the nail bed on all the other fingers. You see how that works? You can do that on this hand too. Either way. So you can do them at the same time. Don't need to. I don't know if it's more effective to do them on separate hands at the same time. I don't know. But again, that's a really nice thing to have when you don't want to be out in public doing this. Although I will say, this is a kind of interesting thing about tapping. So what I didn't go into this in detail, but the points that you're tapping on correspond to meridian lines that run through our body. They're little rivers of energy that the Chinese have known about for thousands of years. But what you'll notice then if you start seeing people is that they correspond, the points are those that we naturally place our hands on. in specific moments in our lives. So if we're shocked or upset about something, you notice that we put our hands on our chest. That directly corresponds with these points, which is K27. It's the 27th point on the kidney meridian, right here. We put our hands on our mouth. We might even do this. You're touching these 2 points. People put their hands on their faces. They might be touching these points here, right? I don't know, people pat folks on the head. Maybe this is a really big meridian point that connects a bunch of ones that run through our heads. In any case, so you'll start to notice that people do this anyway. If people, again, they get over a scare, they'll say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that just happened. And what are they doing? They're actually calming themselves down by tapping these meridian points. So there are things that you can do, you can even rub them. If you don't like the tapping, you can just put your hands over them and hold them, or rub the spots. Some people don't actually like the tapping. And if you are teaching your kids this, which is an awesome thing to do, some of your kids might not like the sensation of the tapping. So you can just hold your fingers there. Another thing you can do is simply imagine that you're tapping. It may not be quite as effective, but because there are little sort of electrical impulses that come from the tips of our fingers that help sort of stimulate these meridian points. But if it's imagine tapping or you're not going to tap, then try the imagination route and see how that goes. So there are so many other things that we could explore with this. I hope this has been really helpful to you. I urge you to do some tapping. You only get results if you actually do the tapping. Just thinking about it does not work. I have a lot of different ways that you can work with me. I offer individual sessions. I am starting a new class, which I will be telling you all about very soon. That is going to be tapping plus some other things, and I'm calling it the Serenity Circle, and it's going to be pretty sure an 8-week course that will be starting soon. So watch for more information about that. I also have an online course if you just want to learn more about tapping, kind of get into more of the details about it and run through a bunch of nice exercises. It's called Stress Relief for Struggling Parents. That's also available. So I would urge you to do tapping every day if you can. Tapping in the shower is a great place too. It's sort of just as an, you just sort of think that that's the time to do it. And, you don't have to do 15, 20, 25 minutes a day. Even if you did 5 minutes of tapping, that still helps. It still helps recalibrate things. It brings you back. It releases, again, all that energy that we just hold on to so tightly when really we just want to feel it and let it go. If we can feel the things initially when we're experiencing them, then we wouldn't later have to tap to get rid of them. But most of us have been trained from a very early age as boys to not cry, as girls to not get angry, or too bossy, right? That's the code word for girls. And so it takes a lot to allow ourselves to say, you know what, it's okay that I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, and I'm just going to allow it, and then I'm going to let it go. So many wonderful ways that you can use tapping. I hope this has been helpful. I am happy to answer any questions. Again, I invite you to look into doing some tapping sessions with me, especially when you're getting started. It can be really, really helpful to tap with someone else. Yes, you can tap yourself, all by yourself. Absolutely, you can. The trick is that most people don't do it regularly when they're just relying on themselves. And they also tend to not notice patterns, specific words that come up when you are working with somebody else. So there are themes that tend to come through, and just different perspectives that I can notice when I'm working with somebody that often the person has not picked up on themselves, because it's hard to kind of analyze yourself and figure things out. So I invite you to take advantage of that if that sounds like something you'd like to do. I also want to start doing more tapping with kids. Kids do take to tapping often quite nicely. I know our kids present some other difficulties. And so surrogate tapping is another thing that I'm going to be doing a whole lot more of. That is where you tap on yourself while holding your child in your thoughts. So you're tapping for yourself, on yourself for your kids' issues. So there's a whole lot going on with that too that can be really helpful for our children. And so stay tuned for a lot more information about a lot of things coming up soon where we will be able to do a whole lot of tapping together. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope this has been helpful. And I thank you very much for joining me, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit. Okay, bye-bye.